All right, so in this lecture, we're going to talk about how you can go about picking good colors for your painting. This isn't going to be so much color theory, but more of the sort of analytical, scientific side of things, and specifically talking about your core colors and your shadow colors, as well as your light colors. Okay, so here we have this little creature that I sketched out really quick, and on 3 separate layers, we have the lighting, the shadows, and the base colors. Okay, and by changing each of these, we're going to experiment a little bit to show you how you can create good color combinations. Now, initially, we have orange here. He's sort of the base color. The shadows are a purplish color, and the highlights are a yellow orangish color. And if we come over here and we turn these to normal, you can see it'll turn the opacity up. That's what our highlight layers looks like. We've got orange highlights and this kind of whitish orange color. Now we're gonna turn that back down. Turn that back to screen. Our shadow layer here, we turn that to normal. You can see is purple. Now for this, you don't need to worry about changing any layers. They're just going to be exactly where they are. All you will have to do is experiment by sliding the hue and saturation slider on each of these layers to try and come up with good color combinations. Now, typically some things that you want to take into account a lot of times is that the lighting is going to be, whatever your highlights are going to be, you want that to be whatever the color of your light source is. So, for example, if you have a torch, or candlelight, that's going to be a yellowish orange color, pretty close to yellow. Maybe you have a glow stick, and so, or some magical energy, and the lighting is going to be green. Or maybe it's outside at nighttime under a moonlit sky, the light is going to feel blue. Now, a good rule of thumb for the shadows is to have it be close to the same color as whatever the environment is, because that's probably going to be what the reflected light coming from underneath the object is going to be. So, for example, if you are in a red rock canyon at nighttime, you might have your highlights be a bluish color, and your shadows feel a little warmer, closer to the color of the rock. Or maybe you are in a really bright desert. Well, then what you might have would be a bright yellow hot highlight, and your shadows might feel a little bit more blue because there's a lot of blue sky, and that's kind of what the ambient sort of sliding is around. Now, as artists, we get to sort of take some liberties to make up our own lighting scenarios, but we don't want to stray too far from reality. We want to use reality as an inspiration, but not as something we have to stay locked into. It's something that we can kind of get creative with and find something that actually looks better than reality might look. Especially when we're creating things that don't exist, we don't often have reality to just draw from. If we're not doing a still life or looking from a reference photo, then we're going to be painting out of our head. So you want to know how to create color combinations that look good and make sense. What I typically like to do is, we have here our shadow layer and our highlight layer. I like, if my highlight layer is going to be warm, then I want my shadow layer to be cool, and vice versa. If my shadow layer is warm, I would like my highlights to be cool, although that doesn't always have to be the case. So what we're going to do, let's come over here to our image. We're going to go to adjustments, and then we're going to go to hue and saturation for our shadow layer. And by doing this, we can sort of slide this around and see what it would look like with different colors of shadow. So let's see what it would look like with a blue shadow. And then we'll change the highlights to do the same thing, hue, saturation. Change the highlights to maybe more of a, I mean, it's already yellow, which is kind of goes good with green, but let's do maybe more of a red. And you can see how that also looks pretty good. It kind of makes it look a little different. You also want to take into account your base color. So even if it might make sense, right? You have a yellow light and a, maybe blue shadows, and, thinking about it logically, it makes sense. Well, maybe that blue shadows doesn't actually look very good with an orange object. And maybe you need to change it a little bit, even though rationally that makes sense. That's totally fine. Art, the only right answer is what looks good in the end. So let's try changing the cat itself to see if we can find something that we enjoy more. And I think that red goes really great with the blue shadows and the red highlights. Okay, so your assignment, it's really simple. Just download this resource, and I want you to come up with 3 different color combinations by using the shadow, highlight, and base color layer, and sliding your hue and saturation sliders around until you can come up with 3 that look good. Try doing cool lights and warm shadows, or cool shadows and warm lights, and anywhere in between, and try messing around with the color of the overall creature as well. It's pretty simple, but I think you'll be surprised at how much it helps you understand how to pick good colors and realize that it's not as hard as you probably thought it was. So one last thing that I want to talk about before we move on is making sure that you just don't get too saturated. Another issue that a lot of beginner artists have is they want everything to be really bright. This guy right now, he is pretty saturated, and if I was doing a finished piece, I would probably tone it down quite a bit. But you can see that even in this, the shadow area, even though it reads as bluish, it doesn't jump out at you as blue. In fact, if we use our eyedrop tool here, you'll see that it's actually pink, desaturated pink, even though it reads to us as blue. Okay, the eye, all these different areas, they're not crazy saturated. This part of the neck is pretty desaturated. The only part that's really saturated is his back, and even that isn't as saturated as it could be. It's a little bit towards the upper right of neutral red, mid-tone red. So keep that in mind. Usually less saturation is better, and reserve those saturated areas for a few spots that you really want to draw attention to. So anyways, that is it for this lecture, and I will see you guys in the next one.